the Black Data Processing Professional Associates. We are, can you give me the next slide, Reggie?
I think. Okay, it hasn't worked.
Okay, well, we will work through technical difficulties. So, there we go. BDPA is an organization founded over 40 years ago, and it was really meant to help those being underserved because they were not appearing in the boardrooms. And this is specifically the technology element of the Latino and African American communities. Now, that's how this organization started, but does that mean all of our members are African American? No. We have a wide swath of different ethnic, sorry, just lost it there, ethnic and religious persuasions as part of BDPA. We also really support our female BDPA members, and we especially go out and try to work with youth. We were the very first to see the possibility of helping those who are underserved to have greater careers. Next slide, please. Okay, so the agenda we're going to basically do is we're going to have kind of an open networking for about 15 minutes, give people more time to come in. We can talk a little bit more about the history. I'm also going to talk a little bit about some upcoming events. So for our next 3 months, we actually have some really great programming. Next month, we're working with, we're working with Signature Consulting Group. They are going to be doing their own presentation on DevOps, but they have been happy enough to partner with us next month and be our presenter for our monthly program. So we can look at not only what's happening currently in DevOps, how one goes about configuring their resume to be in a DevOps type position, what DevOps positions are there, what future is there in DevOps, and also any hot topics that are coming out in DevOps these days. So that's going to be a really active participation next month. The month following, before our September meeting, we will be having our national chapter meeting where we normally meet in person at a select city. And prior to COVID being a thing that we now all are dealing with, the decision was made to host in Atlanta for the next 3 years. When COVID hit, our organization had to be nimble enough to move the national conference online. And I'll have a slide for that at the end of this presentation. But anyway, when they're at national convention, not only are the adult members meeting each other, attending seminars, creating new networks, meeting with corporations, meeting new technologists in different areas. It is this great synergy and synthesis of possibilities. I went to my first one about 7 years ago in DC, and I was just amazed. It was before I even being an officer. And then I was proud enough to take kids to New Orleans 2 years ago. Was that 2 years ago? Yeah, 2 years ago. 2 years ago, we took kids to New Orleans and competed. And we were just really astounded by the talent that the kids were showing in not only from our chapter, from other chapters. What they do with the kids is we train them usually start of the year up until conference. We teach them the basics of technology, computer science, how to critically think, and what they are given is this at the beginning of the conference. They are then locked into a room with only their team members and their coach. They have no access to internet or books, and they have 8 hours to build whatever the project is. It could be an ERP system. 1 year, they built a system to help those who were at midpoint in their career figure out and calculate how much money they needed to have when they retired. The kids didn't really like that one so much because it didn't tie to them. But we've had other programs where they've built robots, just all kinds of really cool stuff. At the end of the competition, the kids are graded, and the top 3 chapters receive scholarships. We use virtual. We are still working out the logistics of how everything's going to come together, but in about 35 days, we will be having conference. And because it is all virtual, the conference is $50 for students and $150 for adults. That's deeply discounted from the normal $500 or $350 that we would pay respectively in a normal year. The month following our conference, I am really happy. We've kind of planned our structure around the idea of digital learning, because as we all have had to transform our ways that we interact with our work and how we learn things, digital learning has now taken a new place in our mindsets. So we're very happy to have individuals from City College who actually are starting up their own cybersecurity program, which I'm going to talk about for the following month. But they will be there to talk about digital learning. We have a speaker coming from Chicago State University, going to talk about a 4-year college, and hopefully we can get in a couple more colleges. We have a speaker coming from Microtrain to talk about professional training taught as digital distance learning. And then a young man I've been working with very recently had asked, I met out at a bar one night, and he had asked me, how does one get into a CTO track? And I had told him I had heard about a program at Berkeley. And through his persistence and my direction, he was able to get into the CTO Training Academy in Berkeley. So he'll also be part of our panel. He was a last minute addition, but I really think distance learning is going to be a great program. In October, we I've programmed so far for the year. We have 2 speakers, one individual who is active in cybersecurity, and then we actually have a speaker from City College because they're instituting their own cybersecurity academy program, which I actually was lucky enough to get a scholarship into. So I'm very happy to hear them come speak because my classes will just be starting around the same time. So that's kind of what we're doing the next few months. That's a little bit about what's going to happen over the summer with BDPA. And I guess I will go ahead into the introduction of our illustrious moderator for the evening. Can you bring me the next slide? One more? Okay, hold on. We'll get to it. A lot of information I put in here. Yeah. Next one should be Reggie. No? Okay. Sorry about that, guys. There we go. So, Reggie Rush is, first of all, a good friend, a mentor, and my immediate predecessor as the former president of Chicago chapter of BDPA. Reggie is an outstanding humanitarian to his community. He is always there on the spot to illustrate the points of the convergence of passion, power, and diversity. If there was a spokesman for integration of IT into underserved communities, I would say Reggie should be the spokesperson. And he did not pay me to say that.
I guess I'm going to have to now.
Reggie is the Senior Director of Client and Community Relationships for his company, DIV IHG. They are a solutions company headquartered in Hoffman Estates. I've known Reggie personally for coming up on 12 years since I went to grad school. And I will say that Reggie is one to give an encouraging voice. He is a man that knows no limits. Nothing seems to stop this man. And so when I thought of a moderator, I could think of no greater person to step up and help us start this conversation of artificial intelligence. And to that, I now hand over the mic to Reggie. Reggie, it's yours.
Thank you, John, for that. I guess I'm gonna have to send you a check now. But before I get into talking about AI, you said a couple of things about BDPA, and I've been around it for a number of years as well. And when you look at the current climate, BDPA is over 40 years old on a national basis. Chicago chapter is about 35 years old now, and we've been doing something that no one else does. And the challenge that when we do it is we all have daytime jobs. This is not a paid effort from the president all the way down. So the dedication of this team and what they're doing currently is just outstanding. The number of people that we touch, whether it's students or working adults, and whether that's a novice IT individual or whether that's someone that's been in the business for 10, 20 years, this organization has touched them, has helped them, and continues to help them move forward in their careers. And my hat is always off to BDPA. So thank you for all you guys do. You mentioned DevOps. We're talking about AI. We mentioned cybersecurity. You know, these are three of the most active segments of technology right now going on. And I think that this particular topic, not only today, but for the future, will allow people to have great incomes and great opportunities to do some great things with, both in their corporate environment and both from a humanitarian standpoint. So I'm excited about tonight. I've got some great people on the panel with me. I'm going to introduce them and I'm going to ask them to take a few minutes to just talk about who they are and what their job function is and why they are in AI. So I'm going to start off in alphabetical order. And so Chip Delaney, would you please introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what you do currently?
Sorry, I was on mute. Certainly, thank you very much. So my name is Chip Delaney. I'm an Australian national and US permanent resident. I moved over to this great country a few years ago when I met my wife on a trip I had to America. And since then, I've been very involved in artificial intelligence. Prior to that, when I was in Australia, I worked in lean consulting, process improvement, which segues quite easily into artificial intelligence. After all, with the technology, we're constantly thinking about how can I create a more efficient way of being able to do a particular task, whatever that task might be. I work in the legal technology space here in Chicago, and specifically in AI around building models and machine learning. And my job function there is very much on the strategy and business development side. But I also head up a trade association based in Washington, DC, called the AI Association. And we act as a voice for the artificial intelligence and automation community in Washington. And we're a very new trade association. In fact, we're the first AI trade association to be created in the US. Previously, all topics of AI were done by the Consumer Technology Association and all these other different special interest groups. However, the challenges that myself and a few colleagues saw that are going to evolve because of artificial intelligence, the nature of the technology, and how it's going to permeate through every different level of society, there needed to be an honest conversation that occurred. There needed to be an education that evolved at every level of government, because all the challenges that we have do present amazing opportunities, ways for us to be able to have better access to medication, better ways of being able to get access to energy, smart cities, better infrastructure, better technologies, better supply chains. However, there are enormous risks. And for me, the most important thing is that we mitigate those risks as much as possible, because at the base of all of this are humans, and have an effective deployment at scale of artificial intelligence, not only in America, but across the world. It needs to be one which is wholly human-centric, and ensuring that at the end of this, we maintain an idea of purpose as the foremost goal.
Thank you, Chip. Next, Matthew Gonsalves. Did I say right? Gonsalves?
Hear me?
Yep, here now, Matt.
All right, yeah, Gonsalves. Hey, everyone. Excuse me. So I work at a company called Cognitive Scale, and I guess briefly, for anybody who's interested, my background originally was at UMass. I studied electrical engineering and computer engineering, and I think, I worked hard in high school, so I think I had thought of myself as a good student, we could say, but just in general, I chose electrical engineering and computer engineering because I could see people who at the time, like, Bill Gates had already been wildly successful. He had already seen Google and Amazon. This is a place where we're obviously going to have a lot of jobs. And so I didn't necessarily know at first what I was interested in doing or spending my time with when I got into it. And I worked for a defense contractor and also in the aerospace industry before I started wanting to learn more about how technology companies ran. And so I got into technical sales. So I've worked as a sales engineer for about the past 8 years. And my current company is based in Austin, Texas, called Cognitive Scale. They are selling a couple platforms. The second of which I'll describe actually ties right into what Chip was just mentioning around the risks associated with AI, and it's trying to mitigate risks and provide trust to an organization's use of AI. So being able to audit the models that are running, whether it's for loan application or whether it's something that's screening data to interpret images that may be used for diagnoses, etc. Making sure that they're fair, that there's no bias, that there's explainability, and that you have counterfactuals included. And then also the company is there to drive and deliver point solutions to a few different industries. One of which is the health insurance industry. You have second largest health insurer in this country is losing $9 billion due to fraud, waste, and abuse. And COVID is a time when you've got quite a bit of fraudulent claims being made. And we've heard in the news there have been, we don't need to get into whether it's true, I don't know, but you've heard on the news that people are getting paid more to put down a COVID diagnosis, et cetera. Well, I think that fraud and $9 billion is how much Anthem loses annually due to fraud, waste, and abuse. So that's pretty wild. So there's, I'll just keep harping on the amount of opportunity that there is out there. And really, at the end of the day, if I'm trying to be a technical person, explain it to anyone, you're using math in different ways to find out answers to questions you'd like to find out, and that's what it's all about. So,
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
And thanks for having me.
When you look at AI, it's been what over the last decade. It's really grown from like this pipe dream we've had into this strong force. And really, this is almost like we can call this the fourth industrial revolution when you look at AI and what it's going to do for us. And I think also if you start browsing through the job boards, you're going to quickly find that the heart of a lot of the jobs out there now are talking about AI. And many of the jobs going forward, now and going forward, you're going to bump up against AI. And you talked about DevOps, and I do believe that there is a good bump up against DevOps and some of the other things. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And everybody wants to know how to optimize, right? How do we make our day-to-day easier? How do we be more productive and functional? So whether it's your next job interview, whether it's related to data science, machine learning, deep learning, you're going to hear about AI as we continue to go forward. So I believe just a few housekeeping things we're going to run through. I'm going to run through some questions. Then I believe we'll open up for questions, and Charity, you're going to feed those out to us, I believe, correct? Okay. And we'll get into something.
I'm sorry, I'm not aware of any questions.
Okay, I have the questions. If you get questions from the audience, they're feeding them to you?
Or Brian is monitoring the chat room, if that's what you mean.
Okay, so thank you. Okay. So let's kind of start, gentlemen, kind of rudimentary. Some people understand technology at the basic level. So could one of you take the question, what is AI? What is truly artificial intelligence?
Yeah, you want to take it to start, Chip?
Yeah, sure. I'll take a lazy answer. So John McCarthy coined the term in the 50s at this sort of Dartmouth conference of a bunch of smart people that met and decided to talk about creating an intelligent machine. And he literally just coined it as thinking machines, right? And they extrapolated from that a little bit, but thinking machines. And so when you say that, and we think about back in the 50s, what was the thinking machine? And it was, Enigma could be a good example, of course, but really everything that was a little bit better at doing that, at taking data, being able to process it effectively and spit out an output which was valuable, was, the next sort of evolution. And then as the technology got more sophisticated, we were able to, clarify it down into subfields. It started to evolve an area of its own. But if I was trying to communicate it just for the average person to understand really what we're talking about, I would just say thinking machines. And then from there, it could be a whole bunch of different areas depending on what it is you're looking at.
Okay. And as we're talking through this, there's a lot of people probably online trying to understand, how do I get closer to AI? So there's some, and maybe Matt, you can take this one. There are definitely some technologies that are used more in AI than others. What might some of those be?
Well, let me add to Chip's answer a little bit in answering your question. I think that, when you look at the amount of investment that's happening in a lot of the startups, but then also in the incumbent winners, let's say, of Silicon Valley and around the world, the amount of money is like, it's not like just a tidal wave coming in. It's like the tide coming in for a long time. It's just a wild amount of investment, and there's a good amount of propaganda that goes into that. Because if it started in the 1950s, the differences that we have now is that the cost of the hardware and the cost of memory, the cost of compute and everything is just so low, and we've got better hardware than ever. That's why we're not allowed, but able to run the types of math models that have always been around. And so you've gotten more creative in the exact types of numerical methods and statistical probabilistic types of algorithms that were probably already in the textbooks of math that now are being applied to different things. And so when you're kind of wanting to know different examples of where you might bump into AI if you were looking to maybe get a job or something like that.
Yeah. Like,
okay.
What's the popular programming language that's used in AI?
I think that there are quite a few, and really it's if you were just looking around searching for which ones are the most used in terms of a lot of the statistical modeling, you have these types of languages that's almost like if you had a calculator, and so you put in a line of code and you hit enter. You can write a whole script, you could write a long program, but languages like Python and R, and then there are also some studios that you've got this Anaconda Studio, you've got the SAS company, which is doing a lot of statistical analysis. You've got MathCAD, MATLAB. These are, I think Python is the most prevalent, and it's pretty easy to learn. I had started with C++, and there are languages that are doing more scripting like Python, and there are languages that are doing more, I went to school in the mid 2000s, so I at the time C++ was important, and C because you wanted to deal with the operating system, you wanted to deal with some of the hardware on the computer. But in terms of AI, I mean, there's not really much limiting factor to what language you would want to use to carry something out. But let's say that you had an idea that if you could take in all the weather data to be able to predict what the weather is going to be like next week, you have some algorithm out there that's going to be able to interpret that data, and so I think math is a great start, and sometimes it's difficult when you're in school because for me I got so far, but then at some point I started falling behind in class because I would miss one thing here and miss another thing there. It's definitely worth it to for AI to learn these topics well, statistics, probability, you might become a good poker player out of it too. But there's a lot of focus on those specific types of math, and so I think there's really no limit to what you can create, especially if you start today and you start building 5-10 years. Well, that's going to be something significant.
Okay. Yeah, we have somebody probably online. I won't say his name. Who'd be interested in becoming a better poker player, even though I hear he's pretty good.
I am very good. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And you know, I think the reason I brought that up is I know we focus with teaching our kids. We're still focused on C++. Are we teaching Python now at all? Do you know, anybody?
I think a couple years ago we were. I'm not sure currently, though.
So I think, you know, some of the things that we're teaching our younger students is starting, you know, very much, Matt, at that C++ level and teaching them those basics. We do focus in on the math, the critical thinking, as John had said earlier, and all those things. So it's good to hear that those skills can help that younger generation hopefully move into something like an AI opportunity as they continue to develop their skill sets. And maybe Chip, you can take this one. Whenever we hear AI, a lot of times we tie in, you know, AI and machine learning. Can you talk a little bit about why people do that and what's the importance of doing that?
I mean, machine learning is a really critical subfield of artificial intelligence, and it's, you know, in recent years, there's been massive developments in what the models can do. So we talk about AI models, we talk of a product of machine learning where you have some sort of training data, you know, you're training an algorithm on various features of data which are relevant or important. And, you know, at the end of that, you get a model, and I'm very much just giving a very rough example of what this looks like. Depending on what you're training it on, the model is going to have an understanding of something, and that model can be used to do a whole variety of different things, from finding information in data. So in legal technology, you know, let's say you're looking for privileged documents in a data set that's 2 million documents thick for a large litigation suit. If you have a model that can identify privilege information, now it might not find all the privilege information, but it'll definitely give you the best possible start to that investigation or that process, because it essentially does this amazing thing of saving you an enormous amount of time, right? And so the next step is, what is the quality of the model, right? So how do we know if it's a good model or if it's a bad model? And that comes down to what the process of the data scientists are that are building the model. So do they have an established criteria? Why are they choosing certain inputs to train the model on? A whole bunch of things. But to simplify machine learning, I think of it as like a child's brain, right? Where you can teach it and start learning different things that are relevant and important. And then how much you're teaching it and how well you're teaching it and the different methods of which you're teaching it, because machine learning, of course, is a massive field. There are a whole variety of different ways that you can actually create models. You're going to end up with a product which you can then use. So, you know, in recent years, like I said, machine learning has been amazing at being able to, you know, help us in just regular services. I think of a really good use of machine learning models that we interact with day to day, Siri, right? Alexa, IBM Watson, all of these are various implementations of, again, another subfield of artificial intelligence, natural language processing, but they use models. They use models to be able to pick up on certain things, and that model can then, you know, bring back information because it's been trained to understand these things. So machine learning is a really critical part of artificial intelligence as we're currently using it. But like Matthew said, as we get better and we're able to understand more about, you know, better ways of processing information, different, you know, data sets that we have access to, better algorithms, and then things like quantum computing, which we're just at the start of being able to understand. This could go in a whole bunch of different directions. But yeah, it's definitely a very critical part of the AI spectrum right now. And in terms of regulation around artificial intelligence, right? How it's used, all these different topics and articles that we see in the news about facial recognition in law enforcement, these kind of things. These are machine learning models, right? They've been trained on data. And this is where that conversation of bias in artificial intelligence comes straight to the front. Because we start talking about, well, okay, if we're training it on data and we're using different kinds of data, what's the quality of that data, right? How do we understand it? And so being able to have really succinct processes, I think fundamentally begins in an education around, A, what is machine learning, so the public understands what it is. And I'd be pretty accurate guess to say most of the public wouldn't understand what machine learning is, apart from maybe hearing the word. Then you can start to build into a more informed conversation about all sorts of things. How can we get people trained in understanding how to build models? You know, again, to Matthew's point, data science, analytics, being able to understand the foundations that then lead to the ability to create those models, to be able to actually use machine learning as a process to build new platforms.
Well, thank you for that. And you kind of move right into kind of something else where I'd really like to get both your opinions on. And so I'll talk about this next thing and kind of stage it. I'd like both of you to really comment it. Since you're already talking, Chip, you can go first and then Matt. But, you know, there's so many misconceptions around AI. You know, some of the most common ones are, AI, it's going to replace humans and the systems aren't safe. And, you know, it's going to lead to significant unemployment. And I know you and I talked about the trust factor of AI and why people are scared. Can you talk about that? And then Matt, I'd like to hear your comments on that too.
Yeah, so so this is fear, and fear is usually evolved from not understanding something, and that speaks to a poor job in education, in being able to make sure that the public has an understanding of what this technology actually means, how they interact with it. The more that people don't understand when they're interacting with artificial intelligence, they're going to start thinking about Skynet and Terminator, right? They're going to think about what was that amazing movie that, the guy was in Scandinavia or something and there was the AI. One of you probably knows it. But they're going to go to this doomsday idea if there's no kind of base of, well, this is a tool, right? This is a tool that can vastly improve the way we do all sorts of things in society. But like any kind of technology that we develop, right? Nuclear energy, great example. Can be used in nuclear fission to be able to do everything from medical applications through to nuclear power. But it can also be used for very horrible things. And so there's an enormous responsibility around how we're actually building these tools, right? Education and understanding when artificial intelligence is used. And then, like I was talking about before, appropriate processes of regulation and legislation that do two things. One, don't prevent innovation and don't prevent AI from being an amazing market of opportunity in the US, but also make sure that there is education and information at the municipal level. It can't really be left to the federal government. It has to be in schools all over local areas so that people aren't fearing this thing that they don't understand, right? It comes back to that idea of fear.
Oh, thank you. Matthew, like to share?
Yeah, sure. And I think with most things, education is always going to be on your side. If you can learn a little bit more about how something works. One thing, there's so much. I mean, it's just wild because if you can learn, if you find some problem and you can see what the power of being able to write a program that does something, and then you can see it play out. And I'm not speaking as the world's best programmer here, but you will learn how the language that you're trying to use works as you go through it. But you'll be with your purpose to solve the problem that you're looking at. I agree that there is a lot of fear for AI. Now, I think if we define like what is the end, you hear the word singularity. You hear guys like Ray Kurzweil, who when he was a young man, he developed a program that could write music all by itself, and he's a futurist. I think he heads the AI. Well, he had something at Google right now. Maybe he's like chief scientist or something like that. It's probably an honorary title. But if, there is this idea about a general intelligence that would be akin to working like the human brain. And I think that if someone is learning about programming, they tend if you're learning about programming and how you want to outline your program to design what you want to do, and then you have your program, it seems to be a mirror to the way that the mind works. And so a lot of people who really want to develop general intelligence, artificial intelligence, they like Google DeepMind and I'm pretty sure OpenAI, which is Elon Musk was the one who was originally affiliated with OpenAI, but Google's got DeepMind. They bought it. I think it's based in London. These companies are moving towards general AI, and what you have there, it could be scary if you have companies who, although they're on American soil, are global companies that become so powerful. There won't be a way to catch them, and in capitalism, they're going to keep going further and further. So it would be upon them to want to bestow the technology upon society, and it's up to us whether that regulation likely would take place eventually. But I think that it would be worthwhile to have, and there are some movements in the world, and one guy's name is Ben Goertzel, trying to bring the most, like as much of the best of what AI can do to all people. You still have to have people wanting to participate. So from like an economic perspective, why I would want to get in is because I'm in sales. So right now on a daily basis, I'm not even necessarily coding. But as you mentioned earlier, Reggie, I mean, there's certainly a great life that you can carve out for yourself. I'm not really too far along in my career, but with just a undergrad degree, and at this point, I mean, I don't even know that you need a university degree. I'm not going to discourage going to college, but you can learn enough skills where you can get a job at a great company with a great income, and all they care about is that you can do the work. Now, the question around fear, well, there's always going to be fear, and it's up to each individual whether they want to be overtaken by fear. But we're nowhere near anything that we should be afraid of, although we surrender a lot of our data. So if there may be more and more often examples where we get to be we really do possess our own data. Like, ask yourself this: do you own your own medical data? You could if you started taking it down. Do
Right.
insurance companies, they have a good amount of data, but they don't even necessarily have all your data. So
Right.
we have companies like, Google and Facebook, they do it through ads. That's how they make their money, off of you giving them free data. Amazon is able to use it to help give you a better sell. They sell better, they give you better recommendations, etc. But I would be more afraid of privacy than I would be afraid of like AI taking us over. But I think that it's important I don't think we want too much power, and maybe some of these companies will get broken up eventually, but I would be more afraid of a company who we think is on the side of our country, but is actually a global company, and his only purpose is to grow because they need to keep making money and keep growing and growing. So we can't really depend on corporations to have the greater good in mind, even though it would be the hope. But as a baby, this baby doesn't know how to do very much so far in terms of like where AI is. But I mean, for me, privacy would be the thing that, and it's different answer from different generations, because if I grow up, I'm not, it's funny to hear myself saying this, but if I would tell my parents if I was going to go out, and I would, and if they knew where I was and they wanted to call, they could call if they wanted, but there were no cell phones. And like, maybe I think I got a cell phone in college, but I didn't really want one. And a lot of times don't really want one right now, but kids who are raised on cell phones and then they know what everybody's doing, and mom and dad can call them, or whoever can call them and get a hold of them. And their mind works differently, and they're entering the workplace, and they'll continue to enter the workplace. So, like, we don't know how a lot of the things in our cell phones work. We can describe how GPS works, but am I going to make the next GPS system? And it'll just, the further and further that people who choose not to know how it works goes, then the more they'll have surrendered, I think, in terms of freedoms, actually. But that doesn't mean everyone won't benefit from the good aspects of AI. But I don't know that if you don't try to learn how it works, you can necessarily depend on the goodwill.
Okay, thank you. You talk about goodwill and you talk about getting a good understanding about how it works. It's interesting to me because when you look at the executive world, whether it's the business side or the technology side, I think many of those execs understand the value of AI, but I think a lot of them are still worried about the adoption of it as business leaders. So if you can take that and then Chip, like to hear your comments and thoughts on that topic as well.
Well, there are different areas in every business where you may or may not be able to apply AI, and adoption could go in different ways. If it's adoption, as in, can we create something that would be useful that if we put on our public website, the interface would work, people would use it, and it would be serving up useful recommendations or predictions or being helpful and useful. It could be if I'm providing, in Iron Man, he's got his suit. I think they call it Jarvis, and he's looking through his lens, and he's got augmented reality type stuff, and it's telling him everything along the way. Well, there are people who are working in finance or working as sellers of insurance or different financial products that, well, you may be able to deal with 10 customers with 100 different products to sell, but with AI, it can prioritize who you should be talking to, what you should be telling to who, what products are best, given that this in the news happened and that geopolitical event happened here, and then prices of such and such commodities changed here. All that could be done by a human, but what you can do is you can make every person, whether it's an advisor or a salesperson, like your best advisor so adoption can happen. It's certainly difficult in more, I guess, slow moving industries. Maybe they're not as likely, but what I was saying before about the amount of investment is that companies expect to fail with AI, so they I think it's like 1 in 10 or 2 in 10 projects fail in AI, and so you spend all this time, you hired these really expensive PhD machine learning engineers, and then you never got anything that you could use that would actually start generating value or saving you money, like that fraud, waste, abuse, $9 billion. They're looking to buy software to help them with that problem, and maybe 1 out of 10 of them fail. So I think that everybody, in some way, the fear is them being left behind. So everybody wants to invest in it. It's a matter of whether you can trust the company that you want to partner with to help you develop that, or if they have a product that already does like document interpretation and things like that. But I don't know that I see so many barriers to adoption. I think it's actually ridiculous how much people are spending with as little as they know about AI. That's what I've seen, but I'm sure there's different observations.
Chip, what have you seen in the whole adoption space from people with AI?
No, that's spot on the money. So a lot of the selling that we do is to lawyers who, are naturally adverse people to any kind of risk. And so there's a hesitation to even implement a machine learning process, regardless of how good it is. Getting total buy-in from all stakeholders is always an uphill battle. You can be as logical as you want in presenting the matter to them, people getting comfortable with the idea that, you know, and then again, this is the legal tech example, comfortable with the idea that this thing found everything, all of the privileged documents, just an easy example to use, or all of the particular things we need. We don't need to go right through it like we normally would in kind of a linear, you know, fashion. That was a huge uphill battle. I remember my CEO, again, my first job when I arrived in Chicago, told me a story of, and he created the first kind of legal technology discovery platform. It wasn't really artificial intelligence, but it kind of shows you about how, you know, people in leadership positions of even large law firms can think about things. And this was back in a while ago, so like 2001, 2002. And every law firm, this is the story he told me, every law firm he went to for the first year that he had this startup going, and the startup was about essentially taking all of the boxes of documents and putting them into a digital format that can easily be, you know, identified. Super basic application, but in the legal field, it wasn't something that had happened yet. And everyone told him that, no, lawyers love paper. They love dealing with paper. This will never be a thing that'll take on, right? So it's always kind of like a mixture of, how do I find the right group of stakeholders that actually want to have holistic buy-in in this process? And it's not, you know, you obviously need C-suite and you need a board to kind of really back something for it to grow momentum, but you need a culture within an organization to want to embrace these kind of technologies and go on the journey with them. You need, you know, different departments of people who have different key roles to want to be part of this journey and not to feel like, oh, they just give me another thing I have to learn, you know. And if you're dealing with a large corporation, that's a massive effort. So there was a McKinsey study on trying to get AI implemented at scale. It's like 1 or 2 years old now, and they interviewed about 1,300 CEOs around the world, and all of them had done some form of AI proof of concept in different parts of their business. Now, a lot of it was stuff that they were already doing data analytics in. And I think it was like 70% of use cases, already just data analytics, different process. Can we get AI to make this process better? So not trying to do something crazy, right? But exactly as Matt said, the amount of success they had from even a successful proof of concept, to get that to be a whole buy-in that goes across the entire company, it's not guaranteed at all because of all of those extra barriers. So there's a lot of work to be done, and it is really can be at different times, depending on what you're selling, depending on what you're doing. Again, legal technology, you're constantly dealing with lawyers who just are really adverse to any kind of risk whatsoever. Even if you're offering something like a risk monitoring tool that, you know, the logic behind this, and you can explain them and walk them through the whole process, they can still turn around and say, yeah, but I just, you know, everything we do is different. I don't know how this is going to be able to, you know. So there's always this kind of challenge that has to be evolved in getting all of the stakeholders on board. And that's just going to require time and work, you know, and maybe better selling. That's the other side. Maybe I'm not doing a good job in communicating models at different times to different people, right? Who am I talking to? Am I talking Chinese right now? It felt like that the other day when I was on a call, you know. There is a process of being able to, you know, and again, it forms back on my shoulders as the person trying to communicate and sell this thing. I've got to empathize with the person I'm talking to, and if I can do that correctly, awesome, get them enthusiastic. There's still this other stuff that needs to be dealt with, and it's culture, you know, it's C-suite and board pushing it, backing it. But, you know, the hilarious part, again, Matt said it, people are throwing stupid amounts of money at it still.
Wow. Yeah. So when I think of adoption and a lot of things that you said and Matt said, you know, this thought of disruption comes to mind, right? And so if the two of you can elaborate on some of the disruption that you see, both from a productive standpoint and from a non-productive standpoint.
I can jump in with one. So So again, I'm going to use the legal example. So most legal cases, most matters, right, an event has happened. Something's happened. Someone's committed fraud or whatever, right? And then it's a reactive investigation, right? I'm reacting to the event, and now I have to call through the data. And so artificial intelligence, when it started off in legal technology, very much about e-discovery, things like that, investigations, forensic investigations, and using the technology to be able to, again, reduce time to be able to find those relevant documents or the information that's going to give you a strategic advantage, or just get you to the information faster. So the logical next step to that is training models, come back to that idea of machine learning, on the data of a matter that has occurred, and then leveraging that model as just a container of features that understands particular things, if it's fraud or price fixing or whatever, and having that model sit on internal communications and identify, flag risky communications to be able to reduce the amount of risk of that happening again, and then the amount of downstream legal spend. So instead of going from a model or a business model, if you think of like the legal technology sphere like a funnel, and at the top you've got international banks and Fortune 500s, and then New York global law firms, New York law firms. The kind of tiers down consultants, and then at the bottom you've got legal service providers that have traditionally provided the review and document management services and all these things. But wouldn't it make sense to take that technology, train up models on all those past matters that had happened, and then just take those models to the top of the funnel so you can monitor internally for those risks and then identify them, therefore reduce the amount of downstream legal spend, reduce the amount of issues that have to then go to a litigation, because you've been able to get ahead of it, because you've been able to find it, right? This thing hasn't happened and then festered like a wound in the organization until, oh, now we found it quickly. We've got to go see what else has happened. And I guess another good example of that would probably be data breach, although I don't know as much about the data breach field, but it kind of follows on similar logic.
Okay. Matthew?
The tunnel with Chip there. Sorry, could you restate the question, Reggie, please?
Sure. We're talking if you can elaborate on disruption, both in a positive way or a negative way that AI is affecting this segment right now.
Yeah, sure. And I have a couple book recommendations for anyone who ends up listening to this or who's interested in their easy, fast reads. I think that in a lot of ways and especially in law, for example, but a lot of the things like sifting through millions of documents or picking out the attributes about thousands of customers or thousands of products, et cetera, and then presenting them, you're saving time and you're increasing the value of the type of judgment that a human could provide in any situation. And so you're seeing disruption in things as everywhere from medicine to legal. I mean, the Da Vinci robotic surgical equipment, it can be trained eventually, and it already has been, but more and more so. It can be trained in every element of the movement that needs to be executed to carry out a surgery, that every single part of it human used to do, and that now can be done. So there's disruption there, but it's also it's now putting the human in a different place. So in some ways, it's distilling the value that humans can provide in a lot of different situations. In other ways, I don't know who is ever going to catch an Amazon, for example. And Amazon was started by a guy who was already working as a quant in a hedge fund. So this is a guy who studied computer science and electrical engineering, and then was working on Wall Street, and then he picked up his trend. He started it. Everything they ever did was based on capturing of data. And Amazon is disrupting everything. And it's like you're always waiting for the next element of disruption. It may be a philosophical question, because I think that all the disruption is certainly going to upset some places. we're as far as I can tell in the research I've done, we're already, the economic downturn was a natural occurrence in our capitalist market, and there was maybe like a peak that occurred in February that they marked. And that's all well and fine, but you see a lot of brick and mortar businesses that are going out of business. Okay, so there's an example where the internet disrupted brick and mortar. AI is, it's amazing how, like everything, you see what gets reported, and everybody just thinks one thing, and I'm certainly not above it. I mean, if I'm following along with some certain sources, I'm going to think certain things about the world in which through my eyes. I'm going to look at the world in different ways, and we're just so far from what would be worth spending any time being afraid of. But disruption. You're seeing things that may be disruptive to banks, but do we ever expect the large banks to be on the underside of something like blockchain? I'm not sure. I mean, they're gonna be adopting blockchain. A lot of them are, and all the market makers who are doing algorithmic work to handle their trading. They've been doing that for quite a while already. So that certainly disrupted the financial markets. I mean, guys in the pit now, it's not you can't compete with systems that are, you can recall your decision to make a trade within nanoseconds or, milliseconds. You can't compete with that for sure. So, and there's a funny interaction between the guy who is the head of Alibaba, Jack Ma, this Chinese guy, and Elon Musk. They were at the same conference together. And Elon Musk was making it seem like Jack Ma was an idiot. And he had a bit of an arrogance to him in that speech. But Jack Ma was just talking about, it's important to try to think of all the things that natural language processing, just alone natural language processing, can do, that once it's installed everywhere, humans won't have to do that anymore. And it's like, we're not there yet where you could say that, oh, we have like the cotton gin, or we have electricity. It's not so prevalent that it's like really replacing the human workers. But when you have machines that started working on farms, then the people who used to work on the farms, they were doing something different. Maybe they learned about how the machines worked, but there's always new ways, new opportunities to pick up new understandings, to be ingenuous, I would say.
Okay. Chip, you heard Matt just talk a couple of times. He mentioned, machines that can do operations, and once you put data in, you don't need humans to do it anymore. So there's a lot of conversation around and concern about people losing jobs. I know when I think of AI, I think of AI as taking away tasks, but creating jobs. So, Chip, can you talk a little bit about that from where you sit?
Yeah. Look, artificial intelligence is going to create jobs, but and if I'm saying artificial intelligence and automation, I'm saying a really super broad field of applications that covers every industry. It's going to create jobs, but there are going to be people that at some stage, no idea when that is, but at some stage will feel some sense of displacement. In similar to when industrial manufacturing in the US, in the Midwest, went offshore, right? So you have industry which starts to bring on new technologies or new ways of doing things. The problem with that is if you don't have a process for being able to make sure those people who are impacted, right, and if they're maybe not professionally educated, maybe they come from a blue-collar background, or like the truck drivers, a good example. Now, I don't know when automated trucks are going to be at scale to a point where you don't have truck drivers in the way that we have it as a place of employment right now. But that is a real risk. of happening, and reskilling programs, especially ones run by the government, have not been successful or widely successful. And at the end of the day, there is risk of people in different industries and different applications losing employment when a new technology comes in that renders their particular task redundant. Now, depending on where that person is in their age, depending on when it happens, depending on steps taken ahead of time to be able to mitigate that loss, that could be a huge issue, right? Because ultimately, what you're playing with is someone's sense of purpose. Not to get too philosophical, of course, but we talked, Reggie, the other day about purpose being such a fundamental part of human life, and feeling like I get up today and I've got some sense of meaning in my job and I have enjoyment in doing it. And honestly, in the midst of a pandemic, happy to have a job. Many people aren't so lucky, whether they're restaurant owners or small business owners of one variety or another. But as this starts to kick up, is artificial intelligence going to create as many jobs as it takes away? I don't know. It depends on the kind of AI as it's applied and when it's applied in what industry. But I do think there is risk there, real risk, of it not being handled properly. And the examples that I think of are recent examples in living memory of industrial manufacturing jobs throughout the US, people feeling like they've been left behind, something's been shipped offshore, and then getting just angry and frustrated. Why am I left behind? Aren't I a citizen as much as anyone else? Don't I matter? Don't I have a job and a role to play? And so there's a lot of work to be done that hasn't really been addressed yet about, when this happens, how will it happen? There are ideas thrown around. I don't know if they're tenable or how you'd actually manage them, about universal basic incomes. Well, how does that look? How do you actually manage it? How does that work? Is it feasible at all? The different companies being able to provide services as a stopgap if the government isn't efficient at being able to do that, and certainly experienced some inefficiencies in recent memory. So yeah, there's a bunch of challenges. I'm concerned about it in so much as I know that at the end of the day, we've got humans making decisions, and the propensity to make bad decisions has been evident in recent memory. AI does provide an enormous amount of opportunity, but is the opportunity made available? And is there enough that's being done at grassroots? And, my wife was a CPS teacher at Wells, just in Ukrainian Village for about 11 years. And then after 11 years, she needed a break because she got really, really frustrated in having an overpopulated classroom, in having teachers' budgets cut. And how do you inspire people? How do you really give students the time they need? And, if we want people to have opportunities and take the most of them, well, there are enormous parts of society which are at risk of being left behind. And so there are going to be more jobs that are created as artificial intelligence grows. There'll be new jobs that we aren't even thinking about. But, that'll happen. My concern is more about what are we doing to help offset the inevitable risks of industry changing, and how are we preparing those groups which already don't seem to have a fighting chance?
Wow. Yeah, that's
sorry, a bit doom and gloom, folks. Sorry.
That's all right. So Matt, what are your thoughts on that? Taking away jobs, or is it taking away tasks? And what's your viewpoint?
Well, depending on how much of a micromanager each of us has in these remote times in their jobs, and I think that there is a trend among at least tech companies that I've seen towards unlimited vacation if you agree with your manager, which sounds ridiculous, but it tends to be that people take less vacation under those circumstances. But that's the policy that the company goes with, and then you're working remote. and you have a job to do. So when you do your job well, and I've read quite a few, I guess, accounts of people working at companies like Google, where, you know, if you're just smart and you do your job in a way where you save a lot of time, it's not as though you should be working all the time or slaving away, you know, working 18-hour days, things like that. And you obviously see a lot of that in finance and investment banking, et cetera. But I don't. I don't know. I tend to be less on the side of dramatic. I think that you're gonna you expressed it originally, Reggie, that the task stuff that anyone probably would be less likely to want to do, things that are repetitive to the extent that you can automate them. It wasn't a job that you might have wanted to do before it got automated. It had to be done. So if you can automate it, it actually does. It frees up a lot. And you know, at the same time, um, we've gone through a significant amount of layoffs in this country, and it was before COVID even. If you look at Silicon Valley, there were tens of thousands of jobs that had been ended just because, you know, we hit the peak of some type of growth cycle in the economy that it had it, you know, eventually even the biggest businesses, they can't afford to pay their debts back. And so we're going through um, stagflation or whatever you want to call it. We're in a tough time economically. There are a lot of people have lost their jobs, but I mean, there are I'm amazed at how many new opportunities there always are. So I don't think that a lot of the jobs that are ending, and I mean, like, let's think, if you spend a significant amount of time educating yourself to get to the place where you're at, and I'm not one of those people. Like if I'm a brain surgeon, for example, um, the best that a brain surgeon can do, they have one example of AI as an expert system, or a system where you're kind of setting rules so that when we ask the system a question or input comes in, we apply the rules that have been documented by the surgeon into the system. And or it's like looking through radiographic imagery to see if we can detect cancer. Uh, you know, like that's helping the radiologist. I don't, and maybe there will be fewer radiologists, but your radiology degree is no less useful. I think that you may use it in a different way. You may need to work with AI so that we can guarantee that the AI that's doing assessment of you know, like either detection of cancer or whatever it be, the ability to help to train that. And that's created a lot of jobs in the third world in a similar way that you have the gig economy. You have, you know, Uber and Lyft, but there's also all the food delivery that's becoming more and more prevalent. You have Mechanical Turks you know, I think Amazon has it. You have other companies. There's one company called Scale AI, and all they are as a company is an interface between companies who want to provide data that they need annotated and labeled, and on the other side they have people who are willing to look at images of traffic and say, I'm going to draw a rectangle around this stop sign, and when the car who I need to train is going to hit the stop sign, it needs to know that that red stop sign means stop here. Or if such and such a light, you know, yellow light means yield, red light means stop, green means go. Or, you know, what is the actual distance that I am from that car, and what should I do in this situation? That company Scale has um, more than 50,000 people all around the world who, although it doesn't sound like an appetizing job, they may not have had a way to make money before. And if they can connect to the internet, then they can get a job here where every single image that they're annotating, they're getting money. So, you know, aesthetically, that doesn't look that pretty to me. There are a lot of different types of new jobs, and I think that just the amount of money that's being invested into AI, and I mean, you know, Chip said stupid money, and it's really weird. It's uh, what makes I don't if anybody's familiar with robotic process automation, RPA. You got UiPath, Blue Prism, Work Fusion, Automation Anywhere. you know, those are macros. You know, you're recording clicks on the screen, and then you got this robot that's going to repeat the repetitive task on the computer. How on earth do you know, like, what are you doing with 200 million investment in like a Series E or whatever it is at UiPath? I mean, it's this, people think that this is going to be prevalent. So that to me is telling that, okay, I can see how we expect people to be drinking Coke and eating chocolates 20 years from now, but people actually are thinking the same way about something like an I would say a rudimentary but still AI, robotic process automation. I think that means that there's money for people to create their own future. Like you can, you know, there's a lot. I really believe that. I don't know that always if you get a lot of investment, that means that you're going to be successful, but you'll have the chance.
So I'm glad you brought that up, because that was kind of the next place I wanted to kind of get to anyway, is that there seems to be, for some people, and Chip, maybe you can elaborate on this. You know, when you look at AI machine learning and then you look at RPA, there seems to be a lot of confusion there, right? They overlap it, or they think it's the same. Chip, can you elaborate on the differences of the two?
Yeah, I mean, they're not the same thing. They're doing different things, and this again is the importance of being able to simplify the artificial intelligence umbrella in a way where people are able to have an understanding, just like you understand, you know, that under automobiles there is trucks and there is cars and there is electric cars and one's a sedan, and, you know, it doesn't have to be in crazy detail, but the banking sector loves RPA. You know, for obvious reasons of math, it's just macros, being able to say, okay, this particular thing and this. And there are, like in terms of, I think I saw a lot of it recently in, I don't know if I'd call them even startups anymore, but financial advisory AI. And there's a couple of companies that are evading my mind right now, but they're really making massive headroads. They make a lot of use of RPA when it comes to learning about who their customer is and what they want their risk portfolio to look like, you know, and being able to fill out information and, you know, provide it, create a profile, and then keep learning from that customer. But they use machine learning for being able to have models that are able to track market activity. You know, when are there risks happening, depending on the customer's portfolio and their risk tolerance. You know, when is a good time to sell a particular share based on a whole variety of information. And some people use machine learning to crazy extents, Renaissance technologies. No one really knows what they're doing in terms of their actual IP, because, you know, if you did, you'd be a rich man. But they've been using, you know, these kind of technologies for a very long time in their medallion funds out of Connecticut or somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Enormous amounts of money through being able to have algorithms that can learn and then adapt and then, you know, identify risk, hedge against that risk, and then create vastly greater profits. So you've got really fundamentally two completely different technologies under a broad umbrella, which covers a whole bunch of different stuff that you call artificial intelligence. And they're just two versions of it. You know, then outside of machine learning, and I won't go into it because I start to go way out of bounds of how much I know, but deep learning and neural networks, right? So is that machine learning? Well, I mean, it's deep learning. It's a different version of being able to identify data, but what's happening inside the process of a neural network and all the hidden layers, you know, largely a mystery in some regards, but a completely different process of being able to take information, tune, learn from it, and then provide an output and then adapt. And then again, other different fields within that as well, generative adversarial networks. There was a hilarious, and you can probably find this if you Google it, GANs and these people don't exist, I think is what it's called. And Matt, I don't know if you knew this company that created all this website, but essentially it was a website that if you refreshed it, this generative adversarial network, which was an algorithm that's been trained on millions of pictures, would populate a new face each time, but that face didn't exist. It was just the algorithm taking all of the input data that it had and then providing a new face. But the person looked real, right? This looked like a real person, and it was kind of freaky. It was kind of fun. And I can share it, so you can share it with all the BDPA members. But yeah,
those are the examples of those are the examples that get everyone excited about AI.
Yeah. If you could put that in the chat box, Chip, that'd be great. Yeah, if you can put that in the chat box, that'd be great.
Break down everyone at work.
Yeah, we like the weird and different types of things. When you look at AI, and we talked about adoption a little bit, we talked about fear. AI is moving really fast. How fast do you think it's moving? What's it going to look like, do you think? What's your prediction in 5 years that AI is going to look like?
Me or Matt?
I know there's a significant investment and movement towards self-driving cars, and you've got a few leaders in the market. And Tesla, this is the thing that I want to keep saying, is that it's amazing. If you scream loud enough and you've got something compelling, and I'm a sales engineer, and my job is to come up with that sexy demo that's going to sell the product. You see this in Silicon Valley, and you see it elsewhere, even in government programs that one side or another in all of history. You want to get, like, Social Security, you pushed for it, and eventually it happened. You send a rocket up, an ICBM Russian rocket, and say you want to send men to the Mars, and then you start getting people watching, and then you see you delivering supplies to the International Space Station. With Tesla, you got 2 billion recorded miles of self-driving car, so they're ahead. It's going to be cheaper to have self-driving cars than it is to have humans, insurance-wise. Like, there will be fewer accidents if all the cars on the road are self-driving. Now, that doesn't mean that it's going to happen all at once, but it's it's happening. So like, I don't know, in the next 5 years, I think you'll have more self-driving cars. You're probably going to have drone delivery. And for self-driving cars and drone delivery, for recording sake and posterity, you got computer vision. So what you're looking at when you're applying computer vision, it's a aspect, it's a discipline of which falls under artificial intelligence. But when you're looking at images, a screen is all these pixels, and the pixels are line by line, and you have coordinates. So you have 0, 0 in a coordinate plane is maybe like the bottom left, let's say, and each pixel is a specific point on the screen. Computer vision is just, it's looking at each individual frame, and it's trying to make assessments as to what it sees. It's drawing geometry around objects on the screen. It's tracking the position of something on the screen in time, which amounts to motion and things like that. So self-driving cars, I think New Orleans uses Palantir, who is about to go public, or they already did. Some of these things are accelerating very fast. And so, like, do we want to have, there are already cameras on a lot of street lights. There are cameras that may be just randomly placed, and I don't know where all the cameras are, but if computer vision can be applied, and we're competing with China, and China is already publicly a communist state that is engaged in capitalism. Though they have a lot of companies who are really successful, but they have AI being applied in a way maybe the U.S. should be scared of. But we have companies who are serving law enforcement. We have probably a lot of private entities who have cameras that are attached to drones. Like, if I was watching some video about drones in China that were showing up in places instead of people making announcements. So, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. You know, it is happening fast, but it's the imagination takes off when we start to think that, like, even I mean, Siri and Alexa, what you got in electrical engineering, you know, we use cell phones, we have you know, we use certain types of EMAG waves to embed information so that we can, you know, like we embed information in a frequency, and then we listen to the radio. We tune the FM and AM radio. Well, we do it with our phones too. Signal processing is really what you're doing when you go speech to text. You're listening to the variation, the modulation, the amplitudes of all the different frequencies. It's a signal that's going out in time, and then you're somehow coming up with language. You can do voice to text. Well, that's still, I mean, when you talk about intelligence, that's like a mousetrap versus a human baby. It's so I think we're way far off, but the imagination takes over, and that's cool about it because that's you know, like you can, if you can sell ice to an Eskimo, then you should be able to do pretty good with AI, I would say. Like I think if people, so like you don't even, you just got to have I don't know. It could be a pep talk enough with people who have hunger, who want to be interested in this. There's so much opportunity. I think it's way more good than bad, I would say. But I also think that you should be wary of companies just becoming, you know, like I'm a competitor. Me, I'm not saying that I want to have these companies shut down. I want to beat them. So anybody I think can beat them if they try, but you got to start because it's really amounts to the data that you have and the data that people will entrust you with.
And how you use it.
Yeah.
Chip, you know, you're in the legal end of the industry, right? And you're working with AI. You know, where do you see AI taking the legal industry within the next 5 years?
Next 5 years.
3 to 5, whatever you want to elaborate on.
I see a growth in the use of AI models. Mm-hmm. So in the example I gave beforehand of you know, training AI on past case data and then using that to give yourself the best possible start to an investigation. You know, like if you are working on a fraud investigation, you have a model that was trained on a similar fraud investigation. You can apply that model, and it's going to help reduce the amount of time it takes you to find relevant documents, right? It's not going to find everything and solve everything at once, but it's going to assist you like any tool, right? Like a new tool to be able to use and help you on your way to having a strategic advantage over your competition. So I see more models being used by the Big Four, by law firms, by in-house legal departments, monitoring, so in compliance monitoring for risks in highly regulated industries like pharma, banking, insurance, things like that, where they get massive regulatory fines if they do things that they should have been looking out for, whatever that might be, right? Being able to use models to hedge against those kind of risks. So the growth in the use of AI models in legal departments, I see happening. I don't know the scale of that. That's a challenge which, you know, people like me are trying to work on. And it comes back to that mixture of education, making sure that it's clear in layman's terms, the business case for using models is understood, and it goes through successful proof of concepts. But even then, you know, making sure that everyone that's involved in the process and is actually using it can see value today and then going forward. So can the model improve what I'm doing today? Yeah, how much? And then can it keep improving? So this idea of continuous improvement. I see there being certain jobs that there'll be less of that particular attorney doing this task and more of them doing other tasks. So there's an avenue for more creative activities happening in different legal departments. randomly monitoring emails, I think, will become a thing of the past. There will be less people doing that and maybe a few people managing a lot of models that do that for them, with a robust process, of course, to make sure that the models are doing their job properly, that the risk factors are suitable and all that sort of stuff. So it'll have an impact. I think it'll be an overwhelmingly beneficial one. But I think that where it's really going to be interesting is in the services side, right? So you have all these different entities, be they law firms, corporations, that ultimately are the clients of, you know, these consulting firms, other law firms, legal service providers, those sort of things. Ones that don't adapt to the reality of the value that models can provide and rethinking the way they have workflows and all these sort of things, those will be the ones that will be at risk of being, you know, deemed irrelevant by technology. Because again, if you've got an option between two different people that are using two different tools, and one is using tools that are overwhelmingly better and result in a better product faster, and the bottom line is that saves you an enormous amount of time and money, then you'd be kind of a fool to go down the other path.
Okay. So it sounds like lawyers will, you know, depending on the system they're using to help them get those get that information quicker, they can handle more cases, be more productive for their law firms, those types of things.
Well, save time, you know, save the amount of time it takes me to find something important, because that's what lawyers are really all about, finding risk in things, doing it as quickly and as efficiently as possible, as accurately as possible, and that's what gives them the advantage. They're definitely not Harvey, whatever his name is, Specter on Suits. I've never seen more of an inaccurate description of lawyers in my entire life than that show.
Okay. Earlier, we talked about risk a lot, and I've heard it a number of times. We brought it up, and there seems to be this overarching ethical piece of AI, right? What function do you see is going to be responsible for that overarching, overseeing the ethical operation of all the algorithms in organizations?
There are different people. Oh, sorry. You should go first, Chip. Sorry. Just
said it right there. Different people, right? So we're thinking in a company. I mean, depending on what the department is and what the risk is they're looking at. This is where jobs will start to actually be created by AI, because specialist knowledge to be able to make sure you understand what algorithms are, monitoring how they're performing, and then having relevant metrics to be able to ensure they're optimally learning and giving results that can be trusted. It's going to be different depending on the department, the kind of data they're working on, and then the industry itself. So it's going to have enormous variety. But then to still talk about risk, but kind of expand on it a bit, there'll be different levels that need to be instituted in a governance sense, from a federal government down to a municipal government, around how artificial intelligence is used. And then, of course, that conversation effectively regulating how corporations are using different models and those sort of things to ensure that it's ethical. So recently, end of 2019, the only real bill that has been proposed on any kind of AI, there's been recommendations made by the Office of Management and Budget, and there's been different proposals written and different submissions for ideas and things like that, but no real concrete bills and policies move forward. The only one that has really been proposed is, and you can find it if you just go on Google, it was actually written by Cory Booker, and I forget who co-authored it with him or co-sponsored it with him. But it's called the Algorithmic Accountability Act, and it speaks about that, having a framework to be able to measure risk on algorithms as they're used. And it's meant to address, and I think the language in the bill, and if I'm botching it, but I think it's specifically addressing companies that have a net profit of $50 million or more. So this is about, and it comes back to what Matt was talking about a while ago. You've got these massive corporations, right? All of this data that's being used, how they're using the data ethically, safely, and ensuring that it's being used in the best interest of their customers or their users. There's only so much that we can obviously do if they get too big and too powerful, but having these kind of measures in place ensures that the internal functions, right? The people who are in different risk departments or different compliance departments and are overseeing these ethical elements, they're ultimately doing it guided on what the industry or what they need to do that the company actually sits in. Otherwise, they're not being employed to be there doing that job. That's simply how, companies work. If there is a regulatory element around the Sabine-Oxley Act or whatever it was, I think that's a pharma one. Maybe it's not. I butcher these things. But that's a good example of that whole element exists, and people working within that industry with that specific job title and function exists because of that regulation. So this will evolve massively as different policies are proposed, as regulations take place, and then those different functions within companies will kind of evolve based on, what their environment looks like. I will add, though, that I think there should be, regardless of what policies are written, ethical oversight on the use of different models and AI within corporations as a standard to make sure that whatever, innovation that's taking place, it's not used for negative means.
Okay. And Matt, did you have some thoughts on that as well? And then after that, I think we have a question that came in. I'll have the question thrown out to you guys. Matt?
I mean, I think that most of the risk is around, there's the risk to the public that you're going to be being taken advantage of in some way. So if you think about who the people are who are working in AI, if imagine everyone in the world, you can try to think of the places where in your imagination you think the smartest people in the world are, and the United States has developed that. A lot of these people in our country are in New York City, and a lot of them are in Silicon Valley, and then you have other cities. I think Chicago is a great tech city in a lot of ways. If you look at the people who are like the physical people right now and for the past 50 years, who have they have been, then there is inherent bias just by virtue of who those people were built into development of anything that's been developed. So in terms of fairness and bias, you want diversity, and like the best decision making should come when I remove myself from the equation and I remove my blind spots, and I get people who differ in opinion from me and who are different from me to also give their opinion. So there's risk to the public in as much as you want to have as diverse of trainers and creators of the technology as possible. But there's liability to any corporation, which is really a matter of who wants to sue who at what time because of who did what. And so if you have experiments going on, Google created an AI that, given like 2 commands, like it all it could do was see the score on the screen and like the layout of the board, that Chinese game Go, and it learned how to win at that game Go, which is much more much more difficult to play in terms of total number of moves than chess, for example. They trained something to play a video game that was winning. You had chatbots. Facebook created a chatbot. Microsoft had a chatbot. And after everything, like letting them play out, you started seeing, a racist bot. And it's like, how does that happen? And it's like those types of risks, I would say, for a corporation who's a public corporation. If you look at, like, if I'm I don't know, almost $1 trillion company, and I end up having a third of my value erased, that you talk about risk to a company, those are the types of liabilities, but risk to the public, if there is no regulation, is that you end up having systems that are biased inherently, and there is no checking on them. But regulations in turn create a lot of jobs.
Okay.
Especially because companies who have monopolies tend to benefit significantly from regulation, because they're the ones, no one else knows their business like they do. So when regulations get put into place, there's all new types of side business to be created, I would say.
It comes out of that makes a lot of sense. Now, there was a question that hit. Is Brian, you going to read that out?
Yes, as soon as I unmute myself. Okay, so the question is, on the dark side of AI, do you see a truth to the ideal of blending the wetware and mind-brain interfaces to computing devices? We have a national BDPA tech talk a few weeks back where he talked about applications from kids' games to helping the handicapped.
I can speak personally from my time when I was studying undergrad, that we had a group who we were creating things for people who had paraplegic, or like I might be able to use the movement of my pupils to say yes and no, focusing on different images and things like that, like a mouse that is controlled by the eye, for example. Or if I can only make a certain thing, you can use AI to detect things like that. Is there truth to the existence of an actual interface to the brain so far that's wet? No. I think that that's being developed, and I've seen a company, and I'm sure if I've seen this one, there must be other ones, called Neuralink, which is also associated with Elon Musk. And I'm not trying to glorify him, but I think it's cool because if he can inspire, then so can other people. But they, our interface right now is our QWERTY keyboard. So like, it's all about how much information can we communicate in the least amount of time, right, as far as our connection to computers. So we interact on social media and other interfaces where we see news, we react to it, and then we respond to it. And we may even carry out actions in our daily life, in our physical life, that's not associated with technology at all, as a result of things we saw. And we may cause other people to do things because of things that we said through the social media. We can use our two thumbs in our phones, and we can type as much as we can. Like, maybe somebody can type 200 words a minute, I don't know. But the idea is, and we're so far from like a great understanding of it, which is the thing that baffles me about even how much is reported about things like COVID, is like, we're not really honest about how little we know about so many things. We don't, like, we do not have a means to right now, we don't have synthetic neurons. We don't have like a splice of 1,000 neurons that we can just like put into the spinal column right now. But we do have ways that we can, with a brain signal, we can tap into specific nerves. We know where in certain parts of the brain we control certain parts of our body. We can have ourselves control robotic arms and things like that. We can do that by tapping into the nervous system. So eventually, I don't know if with your thoughts you can do a Google search eventually just by thinking it. I don't know if that will happen, but I know that there's a lot of positives to being able to help people who have been wounded in battle, or people who have been in crazy accidents, or people who for their whole life have been deaf or blind. There are certainly a lot of efforts and strong evidence to support that we will be able to have nervous system interaction. I don't know about wet connection.
Matt, I want to
like right now, but hopefully soon.
Matt, I want to say thank you, because you really touched on a lot of points. This is John Coleman. I wanted to say that you touched on a lot of points that I personally was interested in AI. Specifically, when you talked about inherent bias in systems and the AI systems, and I believe it was a chatbot owned by Microsoft that within 7 days became racist when it kept interacting with a few years ago.
And you know, in this country, I'm not going to be the one to be the best to know what it feels like. I got to be honest, but bias can happen for lots of things other than just racism, and then also like racism. I really feel like it's important for everybody to know what we are all agreeing to the definition of a word as being, because otherwise we're talking about things and we don't know. Like, you know, my family is comes from an island off the coast of Portugal, um, and it's like, okay, so I'm a person who was born to one Portuguese father and one mom who was like Irish, and it's like racism is that word. I think that there's like a lot of negative things that people do because there is the way that they apply racism. But like if you don't look at me as white and I don't look at you as black, then I'm lying to you. And I think that like I both of my sisters are married to African Americans, and like I grew up in Washington D.C. and like right outside of Washington D.C. Like I think that that word racism, and obviously it's a little bit of a timely time to be talking about this, but I don't think we can say that. I don't think you can say that racism is going to go away. And I mean, I don't even. I'm afraid to say it, but like I don't know that it always has to be bad, because I should be able to look at you and say this is a black man, and you know that if I associate things because of other things and apply that against my detection of you as a black man, that's where the negativity comes in. But so it's a really touchy subject, and so like there's the built-in bias of like, now first of all, I mean, like we might find that Silicon Valley is all Indians. We don't know that. I mean, we have people from all over the world who for whatever reason, maybe they had scholastic excellence that they got into programs in the US, but the US certainly is not like it's not a homogeneous look for technology development. But I don't know what exactly the profile of Silicon Valley woman and man developer looks like, but all of it is built into all of the technology. And so I can't say exactly how much bias has been built in, but let's say that you have I have a 1-year-old daughter, and you know, I'm looking at everything she learns, and sometimes I've seen her cover her ears, and I'm thinking, what the heck did she learn that? She's like, did you hear mom and dad screaming at each other or what? You know, like if you're training an AI from ground zero, then bias gets introduced for a countless number of reasons. And so I think that if I'm gonna continue to pay taxes on my income, then I want there to be something done by the government. So like the only way that they know is to have people who are intelligent enough or willing to hear and listen. And you know, like you see the grillings of the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, and these things happen. But like if all we're doing is labeling photos and labeling video, then who's labeling the video? If it's people in the Philippines, I don't know how to control them from introducing inherent bias into their annotation and labeling. So I as your advocate, but I will pose you the, you know, that's something that is really serious. And that's one of those public risks that I was mentioning, where I like the idea of everyone having the ability to use and apply AI, but we know full well that there are leaders. Just like we have leaders in the world, we have companies in the world. We have national interests, but we also have companies in the world who are getting ahead. And if they're just serving their shareholders, it's not always, you know, I think we may have left morality out of the equation in capitalism at some point, and maybe we'll see a new world order or changes. But right now, it's inherent that imperative that anyone who has interest and can appreciate what I'm saying get involved. And so there's that, but then there are also a lot of economic benefits that can be had by getting involved too.
Yeah, the whole bias thing is a whole nother conversation. We can go down there, but we've got two more questions. So, Brian, we can read the next one off, and Chip, if you can take that. But let me just make one comment about bias. I said, we're never responsible for our first thought, but we're always responsible for our first action. And that's where the bias happens, right? And then next action that happens after that. So with that, Brian, if you could read the next question, and Chip, if you can take that.
Okay, so the question is, do you barriers to entry in the AI space? If so, what are they?
Yeah, massive barriers to entry. I kind of alluded to them a while ago when I was referencing my wife's experience teaching in the CPS system here in Chicago. There's still, look, I'm pretty new to the country, but there's a feeling when I got here of a narrative of, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You'll be fine. It's kind of bullshit. I mean, the environment that you grow up in, if you don't have the resources, I grew up in an environment where I had amazing resources. I didn't have to pay $200,000 or whatever it is for an education over here. It was, I think, my entire bachelor's degree cost $5,000. My entire master's cost $10,000, and that wasn't money I even had to pay. The government took it back in taxes once you start earning like over $50,000 or something. So it's the ability for me to be able to get into a school and give myself an opportunity, is remarkably different than a kid who was going to an inner city school like the one my wife was teaching at, and having to fight their way for attention from the teacher when the classroom is overcrowded, when there isn't funding for resources. Biggest slap in the face that I heard, example that my wife gave me, two examples actually. One was, she said they only got something like $100 and something bucks, like $120 for resources for teaching the kids throughout the entire year. She was the chair of the science department, right? So this is for this entire high school. $120. And then, so that's, you can't buy lots of Bunsen burners with that. You can't go out and buy materials for the kids to be able to use in the classroom to have the same experience of a better funded school, in an area where they can have that funding because there's a higher tax rate, or however it's worked out here. I still haven't got my head around it, but it seems bonkers, The thing which actually makes, here comes a rant, the thing that actually makes a society better and gives people opportunities is for people to have the opportunity to be able to do that. And if you're removing teachers, if you're at the start making it so much harder to get to this next level, right, where you can start building up, well, I mean, that does a lot to someone's feeling of self and where they sit in society and what their value is. And, it's not hard for the average person, regardless of who you are and what you're doing, for you to start doubting yourself and the thoughts in your head of like, I'm not where I want to be, and I'm looking on Instagram all day, and I'm seeing all these people on these boats and these money, and I don't have that, and you can be even doing okay by anyone else's standards, right? But you have this thing being fed to you. Well, how does that feel when you're coming out of an environment where you haven't even had that base start to be able to really, level set compete? It makes it really, really difficult. I think there's massive amounts of work that needs to be done for people to be able to have, a hope of getting into any tech field, and let alone artificial intelligence. I think that there is enormous good being done as well to try and help curb that effort. A good mate of mine that I met when I moved over here, I joined this group called the Chicago Leadership Alliance. I'm not part of it anymore. I didn't have enough hours in the day. But let me sort of promote him here, though. His name's Shelton Banks. Originally from the south side of Chicago. This guy's like maybe one of like the most hardworking people I've ever met. Started working when he was 15, paying his mortgage and looking after his mother. Built his life up, and now he's the CEO of a group called Rework Training, and their entire gig is training minorities in being able to sell artificial intelligence, right? So they come in, and after about 3 months of doing this training, that organization helps put them into, starter sales roles, a lot of kind of like cold calling sales roles in tech companies, so that they can have a chance. So there are groups out there that are doing amazing things. It's not enough. It's not enough. You can't have an overpopulated classroom and a teacher who doesn't have enough. And it's my wife, so I'm passionate about it, right? But it's just so ridiculous to me. How do you have opportunity? Well, you have to enable people to have the opportunity to begin with. And you can't hope to take someone who's 19 years old and has dealt with the past 18, 19 years of just shit for resources, right? Not great environments, walking through metal detectors every day to get into a classroom, absolute madness. And then for that person to realistically, hey, you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps. There's this absurd narrative. It's nonsense. I feel like slapping someone in the face when they tell me that. There's amazing opportunities. Yes, go to artificial intelligence. Yes, you should be reading these books. You should be engaging in these things. There is so much potential there. But that has to be addressed, like straight up, in order for the next step to really fundamentally work. That's the honesty part of the conversation, which is just kind of missing. Sorry, rant over.
Thank you for that. Honestly, thank you a lot. We're not going to get to the last question. We're going to wrap up here. I want to remind everybody, this has been a great conversation. We have more to come. If you'd like to learn more about BDPA, please send your email in the chat box over to Bryant. We'll get that and make sure that you get the information to be invited out. BDPA is an organization that exists on donations. So anyone that would like to make donations, also they can reach out to John or Charity and talk about how we can donate, how we can maybe sponsor one of the kids going to our national conference coming up soon. John, I know that I promised you one, but I want to up that. I'll sponsor 2 kids at this point going forward. And if you two gentlemen can just leave us with, give us a short recap on AI and then we'll close out. How's that, John?
Do I go first? Oh.
Yeah, you go first.
Look, it's an amazing technology that I've found myself since I came to America getting more and more obsessed with because, I'm enormously optimistic about all the good it can do and then the value it can bring to people's lives. At the same time, there's enormous risk if we don't handle it properly. What I will leave as a note is, by creating the association, a big part of that is I want to be able to engage, in some of the things that I just talked about. So if there are people or if there are young people who are, engaged with BDPA and they want to talk to someone in AI, then, please feel free to get them in contact with me. I'd love to talk to them. I'd love to get more involved somehow. So, think about AI, look at it as an opportunity for the future, but something that we have to build together.
Thank you. Matt?
I'll echo what Chip said in terms of any type of outreach and mentoring and, whether there's a formal channel or anything, I'd love to spend time with anyone that is interested in talking to me. I think that there are things that young people might be more interested in than others, which could get them experience even without knowing it in AI. I think that drones and robotics could captivate the imaginations of a lot of people. So to the extent that those types of interests and some of the things out there, I think there's like Raspberry Pi, designing Alexa skills, designing or just playing around with a drone. If there were a way to get these types of things in the hands of some young people who may be interested in thinking about something smart, but I mean business has a lot to do with this, and I'm not here, I'm only saying in my imagination. But when I think about kids, they do link on to things like Iron Man and robotics and um, you know the challenges that you go through. Okay, I mean, are there barriers? I mean, that was the last question. There's certainly barriers to getting involved with AI. We have no doubt about that. Um, and it obviously starts from the beginning. So um, I think things like drones, like robotics, those are certainly more fun. Technologies like that are doing stuff on images and like if somebody wants to create something that a lot of people are going to use, like social media whatsoever, things like that, there are opportunities. But obviously there are barriers to entry where, but there are also removed barriers to entry as well. I think that you have the ability to get jobs in technology that you couldn't get before without a college degree. I don't think you need that anymore. If you look at some of the biggest corporations, they're not requiring that for you to be in a technology job. And if we say that we're all incentive based in some way or another, but that doesn't mean we're just looking to get rich, but to advance our level in society. And I'm speaking from my own place. I didn't come from anything necessarily, and you have the ability to do things with leverage. You didn't need to have to take a loan out, but if you created something that millions of people use, then that's one of the beauties of creating your own software. And so I think that I you really have a lot of power if you create something that with the internet a lot of people are going to use, and that doesn't have much to do with AI. But if you create something that many people are going to use, you've created a way to give yourself a voice, but also to meaningfully affect the users, affect the users.
Yeah, we currently have robotics and drones at the student program level with some of our students, so we're using those. But Chip, you mentioned a gentleman that we'd love you to connect us with. We maybe love to have him on as a speaker. Also, Charity, it sounds like we've got two gentlemen that have offered up to mentor, especially in this space, and talk. And maybe there is an opportunity to connect these two to our student program where they can actually maybe talk to some of the students as well and help lift them up as well. So with that, John, I'm gonna turn it back over to you and let you close out.
Well, how can I follow such a great program? Matt, Kip, I am so glad I reached out to both of you via LinkedIn. I'm even more glad and proud that you reached back to me and that we started a conversation that I think this whole group and others in our chapter who may watch this video on delay will enjoy, have questions, and I'm sure I will be having questions for days. Um, these are the kinds of conversations that get us ready for our national conference where we talk to industry leaders and technology leaders like yourself, and we explore new opportunities. So I want to just thank you so much for taking your time on this hot summer night to spend a little time with us. And we would love to have you come to any future BDPA meetings. We have a meeting every third Thursday of the month. Right now, we don't have one planned for December, but we do have one planned for next month in the DevOps space again. The following month, we will be doing distance learning, and in October, we'll be doing our cybersecurity. we were hoping in November to do a recap of Idea Week, but as we may still be in pandemic lockdown, we might come up with a new topic for November. But again, thank you.
One question: is there an incubator associated with BDPA?
Actually, each chapter is an incubator for topics. We funnel topics up to our national as well, and then they actually have weekly technical talks which are broadcast. So if you have a membership, which is only $100, you have access to that. You also have access to lots of other resources.
And I mean even more so. There are a few in Chicago. I think 1871 is one.
We've been connected to 1871 since they were founded. And from time to time, we've had speakers from 1871. We also work with groups such as Year Up and I See Stars.
I'm amazed by the functionality of crowdfunding at this point. So what I was interested in bringing up was if like a business incubation lab where let's say projects that some of the young folks that you've been mentoring for a long time are getting interested in. I don't think there's any shortage of money out there for great ideas. So
we have an entrepreneurial branch of our each chapter has an entrepreneurial branch as well. We don't have anyone currently sitting in that role. I'm working with a very skeletal executive staff. But if you want to become a member, that board position could be yours.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the thing that I'm just any human like anybody else, and it's exactly. But the best thing that I could at least volunteer would be my time and energy and whatever. So you guys should always feel like I'm an open book for you, and feel free to reach out. But it's been a pleasure, and I was flattered that you reached out. I'm glad I looked at my LinkedIn to respond at the last minute, but thank you for having us for sure. It's been great. And I mean, I'd love to see a wider audience, and we all live in Chicago, so I'd love to meet up with anybody at any point. We can grab a drink or a coffee or whatever, or lunch,
We're looking forward to those days. And that's one of the sad things is that this is such a great organization, and we are at the disadvantage that we don't get publicized enough, even though we've been doing it for the longest. So with Reggie's help and my determination, we are trying to stake our spot in the sand and let people know our flag has been here for a long time.
Yeah, great.
Awesome.
Reggie, any final words?
No, I was honored, feel honored that you guys asked me to moderate. It's been a great conversation. I've learned a lot thanks to these two gentlemen. I think we've shared a lot thanks to these two gentlemen. So it's a great program meeting, a great job from your board team. Awesome.
I'm going to say, Brian, go ahead and wrap us up for the night. Hey, thank you to everyone. Good night, all.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Night, all.
See you guys.